Today's story is about a love that waited 20 years to find its voice, and what happens when two hearts finally speak the same language. Each afternoon, the golden glow of sunset stretched gently over the rooftops of the quiet suburbs, painting the winding dirt roads with warm light. In the small neighborhood where Clara lived, the air always seemed to hum with a soft stillness, as if the world itself was listening to the gentle whispers coming from inside each home. In a cozy wooden house with windows always left open to let the breeze in, Clara grew up surrounded by simple things that pulsed with love. Her family didn't have much, but the warmth within their walls came not from possessions, but from small, steady acts of affection. Every night, no matter how tired they were, her parents insisted on gathering around the old wooden table, the one her grandfather had built long ago with his own hands. On it sat steaming bowls of soup, stories from the day, bursts of laughter, and quiet words of comfort when someone had had a rough time. "I don't want you going to sleep without saying I love you to someone who matters," her mother would say, still stirring the pot on the stove. Her father, ever gentle, would add, "And don't forget to show it. Words alone are just air. It takes action to make them real." Clara grew up believing that love was something you could touch. A kiss on the forehead before school, a scribbled note tucked into a lunchbox, a hug for no reason at all. To her, loving was as natural as breathing. For Ethan, it was all the opposite. The house he grew up in was quiet, cold, and distant. His father, a rigid, commanding man, believed in one rule: men are measured by what they accomplish, not by what they feel. There were no family dinners, no hugs, no whispered affection. Love, if it lived there, had no name, no form, no voice. Clara and Ethan went to the same high school, but they seemed to belong to two completely different universes. She was energetic, outgoing, always involved in student council activities, and had a wide circle of friends. Meanwhile, he was quiet, introverted, always immersed in books and focused on one single goal: winning a scholarship to escape the cold house he lived in. They truly started to notice each other when they were placed in the same group for a final science project. Their first work session took place in the library. Ethan sat upright, opened his notebook, and said without hesitation, "We need to study the effect of light on plants. Do you know anything about photosynthesis?" Clara smiled, her eyes lighting up with a playful spark. "I know it's a rather brilliant process," she replied, not missing the chance to make a pun. That line brought something unexpected from Ethan, a laugh. Not just a smirk, but a real, genuine smile. For the first time, Clara saw him truly smile, short but sincere. From that moment, the project stretched over several weeks, and through each meeting, Clara gradually realized that Ethan wasn't as dry as he appeared. He was intelligent, persistent, and had big dreams. He wanted to use technology to change the world. He just rarely shared that side of himself with anyone. Their first kiss happened in the library, between rows of biology books, right after they finished the final report. It was awkward, a brief and gentle touch, but it was enough for both of them to know they wanted more from one another. The feelings between Clara and Ethan became clearer after the project. They started spending more time together, walking through the schoolyard, watching movies at Clara's house on weekends. Everything flowed, gently, naturally, as if it had always been there. Clara brought color into Ethan's monochrome world. She joked, hugged him often, and left him sweet little notes. Ethan, though quiet, always listened, helped her with her studies, and remembered the little things that made her smile. But it was always Clara who started things first. She was the one to reach for his hand when they walked, the one to lean on his shoulder during movies, the one to speak of their shared future. Ethan never pulled away, but he rarely initiated either. 3 months into their relationship, on a breezy autumn afternoon, they sat together under a tree in the city park. Clara looked into Ethan's eyes, her voice as soft as falling leaves. "I love you, Ethan." Silence followed, still and heavy, like time had paused. Ethan swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "Thank you," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. Clara felt a tightness in her chest, but she smiled anyway. "It's okay," she whispered, trying to hide her disappointment. "You don't have to say anything right now." But then time passed, and those words, they never came. Though Ethan never said he loved her, Clara stayed by his side, hoping that one day he'd be brave enough to open his heart. Ethan cared in his own way. He remembered her birthday, helped her with schoolwork, picked small, thoughtful gifts that matched her taste, but the invisible wall around his emotions remained unbreakable. When they held hands, it was always Clara who intertwined their fingers first. When they said goodbye after a date, she was always the one to initiate the hug. When they talked about the future, she was the one who dreamed in we. 3 years passed. The love remained, but it was no longer balanced. That day was Clara's best friend's wedding. The hall was decorated with white flowers and soft golden lights, like something out of a dream. As the couple exchanged vows, Clara turned quietly to Ethan, her eyes shining. "Can you imagine us standing here someday?" Ethan didn't answer. No smile, no hand squeeze, just a vague nod, unclear whether it meant yes or let's change the subject. On the drive home, the car was silent, but it wasn't the comfortable silence they once shared. It was heavy, as if something fragile was about to shatter. When the car stopped in front of Clara's house, she asked quietly, "Ethan, do you see me in your future?" He kept staring ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "We've been together for so long, you should know I want you in my life. I'm asking, do you truly see me in your future?" Silence. Then, "Of course I do." Clara swallowed the tears. "Then, just say it once, that you love me." Ethan looked down, his hands still clenched around the wheel, silent. Clara opened the door. "Goodbye, Ethan." She stepped out, carrying a heart that had just split in two. In the weeks that followed, Ethan tried to reach out to Clara. Messages, phone calls, even a few handwritten letters. All carried the same rational tone, explanations, apologies, but never once the words she had waited so long to hear. Clara stopped responding, and when they went off to college in different cities, distance quickly became something permanent. Time passed. 20 years slipped by quietly, like pages of a book turned by the wind. Ethan became the CEO of a rising tech company. His office sat at the top floor of a glass and steel tower in the city's financial district. From there, he could see the horizon stretch endlessly, but the view did nothing to fill the emptiness he carried within. Clara followed a different path. Her dream of becoming a teacher was interrupted when both her parents fell seriously ill at the same time. As an only child, she dropped out of college to take care of them. When they passed away just 3 months apart with little money and no degree, she took on whatever job she could to pay the bills. When an opportunity came up to work for a cleaning company that serviced large buildings, Clara didn't hesitate. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and it allowed her to live a quiet life, modest, but hers. Ethan and Clara, 2 separate lives, each carrying an unnamed emptiness. Their reunion happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. That day, Clara was filling in for a colleague and assigned to clean the executive offices, a floor she rarely visited. She entered the large top-floor room where soft rays of sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows, casting golden lines across the floor. She didn't expect anyone to be there. Ethan was standing near his desk, absorbed in a stack of documents. When he heard the door open, he looked up. Time seemed to freeze. "Clara?" The name escaped his lips like a breath that had been held for far too long. She froze. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. She recognized those eyes immediately, the ones that had once defined her youth. "Ethan," she replied softly, instinctively tightening her grip on the cloth in her hand. "I didn't know you were here. I can come back later." "No, please stay," he said quickly, his voice low but sincere. "I just came in early to catch up on some reports." Clara nodded and stepped inside to begin her work in silence, but she could feel his eyes following her every move. Once again, the distance between them felt both very near and impossibly far. After that morning, Clara thought it was just a chance encounter, but it didn't end there. In the days that followed, Ethan began arriving earlier than usual and staying in his office later than he used to. And though neither of them said it out loud, both knew. They were quietly searching for each other in the wide hallways and fleeting moments in between. Each glance, each accidental eye contact brought back fragments of the past, and with it a silent question. Do you still remember? After 2 weeks of these unspoken meetings, Ethan finally gathered the courage and approached her as she was getting ready to leave. "Clara," he said, his voice low and hesitant, "would you like to have a cup of coffee with me? Just to talk, catch up a little." Clara hesitated. The old wounds were still tender, not entirely healed, but curiosity and something warm still lingering in her chest made her nod. "All right, I finish at 6. The cafe was just a few blocks from the building. They chose a small table in a quiet corner. The atmosphere was awkward at first, but slowly small talk turned into a gentle flow of stories from two lives that had been apart for far too long. Ethan spoke of his career, his failures, a few relationships that didn't work out, and the emptiness he never really filled. Clara shared about her parents, the years of loneliness and exhaustion, the double grief of losing them only 3 months apart. "The hardest part," she said softly, turning the teacup in her hands, "was the absence of daily affection. My parents were very loving people. I got used to being loved. And then suddenly, there was no one." Ethan looked at her for a long time, as if truly seeing her for the first time, the girl she once was and the woman she had become. "I'm sorry for everything you've been through, Clara. You deserved more." Clara gave a small, sad smile. "Life rarely gives us what we deserve, only what we're strong enough to build with what we have left." That morning, Clara arrived earlier than usual to clean the executive offices. She often liked to start early, partly to avoid the rush and partly to enjoy the rare quiet before the day began. When she stepped into Ethan's office, she was surprised to find the lights already on. He was sitting at his desk, but no computer was turned on, just a cold cup of coffee and a distant look in his eyes. "Sorry," she said quickly, starting to back away. "I'll come back later." "No," he interrupted, standing up. "Please, stay." Ethan walked over to the door and gently locked it. A simple gesture, but his hand trembled slightly as he turned the key. He turned to face Clara again, and his eyes no longer held that familiar coldness, but something fragile, almost afraid. "I need to tell you something I should have said 20 years ago." Clara stood frozen, still holding the cleaning cloth in her hand, her heart caught in her chest. "I was a fool, Clara. My whole childhood, my father drilled into me that emotions were weakness, that a man didn't need to say, 'I love you,' actions were enough. I believed that, and I lost you because of it." He stepped closer, each movement slow, as if afraid she might disappear if he rushed. "But for 20 years, every time I thought of you, I knew I was wrong. I loved you since that afternoon you said it under that tree. But I didn't think I deserved to feel it. I didn't have the courage. I didn't have the words." He stopped in front of her, his eyes locked on hers, completely open now, without walls. "I love you, Clara. I have always loved you. Please, give me a chance to love you the way you've always deserved." Clara said nothing. The wave of emotion came too fast for words. She couldn't tell if the tears in her eyes were from old pain or something entirely new. All she knew was that her heart, quiet for so long, was now pounding so loudly she could barely breathe. In the days following his confession, Clara didn't give an answer right away. She needed time, not to test Ethan, but to truly understand her own heart. 20 years was a long time. They were no longer the young pair standing under that autumn tree. But what kept Clara from walking away was Ethan's eyes that day. No more hiding, no more walls, just truth, raw, fragile, and incredibly brave. They started again, but not in a rush. They didn't call it getting back together. They called it getting to know each other again. Once a week, they met, sometimes walking in the park, sometimes just sitting in silence over tea. And in that quiet pace, Clara realized something. Ethan had changed. Now he was the one reaching for her hand when crossing the street. The one who placed a gentle hand on her shoulder when she spoke of something sad. The one who softly said, "I love you," without hesitation, and more importantly, showed it in the smallest, most honest ways. One Sunday morning, they visited the graves of Clara's parents. Ethan stood before the headstones, laying down a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, and bowed deeply. "Thank you for raising such an extraordinary daughter," he whispered. "I promise to love her the way you once did." Clara stood beside him, tears falling silently. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone in her grief. When they returned, they spent the afternoon tending to the small garden behind Clara's apartment, where spring buds were starting to bloom under the soft morning sun. And in that peace, Clara knew. This time, her heart was exactly where it belonged. No more waiting, no more wondering, just the present, and a man who loved her not only with words, but with hands that had learned how to hold gently, and a heart that had finally learned how to open. And as spring arrived early that year, carrying soft sunlight and the scent of fresh grass in the breeze, something new was also blooming between them. The little garden behind Clara's apartment was full of life. Daisies, lavender, pale purple hydrangeas just beginning to bud. Clara and Ethan spent many Sunday mornings tending to each plant. Among damp soil and floral scents, they talked about small things. A book one of them was halfway through, a new recipe they tried, or a random memory that slipped into the moment. There was no need for loud declarations, just presence, steady and real. That day, Ethan said he wanted to plant a row of white daisies in the corner, the flower Clara loved most. While Clara was bent over loosening the soil, he suddenly knelt beside her. Not to plant something, but for something else entirely. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, like the man he had become. "I don't want to wait another day," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly, but his eyes steady and certain. 20 years ago, you asked me if I could imagine us at the altar. I couldn't answer then. Today, I want to be the one asking, can you see me in all the days you have left? Clara looked at the man kneeling before her, not the boy who once broke her heart with silence, but the man who had learned how to love, how to stay, and how to believe in something fully. Tears fell, not from sadness, but because everything she had once waited for had finally bloomed. "Yes," she said, her voice soft and choked with emotion, "I see you in all of my tomorrows. And this time, I'm not afraid to believe in forever." "Yes," she said, her voice soft and choked with emotion, "I see you in all of my tomorrows." They kissed in the middle of the garden, surrounded by sunlight, damp soil, and the scent of new blossoms. Time was no longer the thing that kept them apart. It had simply been the journey needed to bring them back, when they were finally ready. Sometimes, love just needs time to grow into the words it couldn't say before. If Clara and Ethan's journey moved you, leave a comment below and tell us, would you wait 20 years for love? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Noah's Stories for more tales that heal, touch, and linger.